There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Sean the Book Maniac. This is my first book haul of 2022, which means very little in that you won't see it until, I'm going to guess, the second half of 2022. And all these books I bought long ago. Or certainly I didn't buy any of them in 2022. But now that we've got all those details out of the way, let's get started. So these are not in any particular order. And okay, this looks like a used book. So this is one that I picked up off the Facebook book exchange where people sell used books just personally and stuff, and exchange, or no, mostly sell. So yeah, this is one of those that I had no memory of, but it's a Kent Haruf novel, The Ties That Bind, and I've only read one by him, which I loved. What was it called? Plain Song, I think. Whoever was selling it, there was a few of them that I wanted, and so I got this one for like $1 or $2 or something. Set in 1977. The protagonist is an 80-year-old woman. Okay, don't know if I need to know any more. She's in hospital. Oh, and there's a policeman at the door because she's being charged with murder. All right, well, as long as it's not a murder mystery. So let's listen to the opening paragraph. Edith Goodenow isn't in the country anymore. She's in town now, in the hospital, lying there in that white bed with a needle stuck in the back of one hand and a man standing guard in the hallway outside her room. She will be 80 years old this week, a clean, beautiful, white-haired woman who never in her life weighed as much as 115 pounds, and she has weighed a lot less than that since New Year's Eve. Still, the sheriff and the lawyers expect her to get well enough for them to sit her up in a wheelchair and then drive her across town to the courthouse to begin the trial. When that happens, if that happens, I don't know that they will go so far as to put handcuffs on her. Bud Seeley, the sheriff, has turned out to be a son of a bitch, all right, but I still can't see him putting handcuffs on a woman like Edith Goodenow. Oh my God. Here is a middle grade novel by a writer who I've only read his adult fiction, and not nearly enough of that, but this is by the Jewish-Canadian author Cary Fagan. Mort, Ziff is Not Dead. I discovered that I really like middle grade fiction in 2021, and Cary Fagan is the author of the Impossible to Find Outside Canada, which makes me so angry novella, which I absolutely love, The Student. And this is one of his children's novels, or middle grade novels, from 2017. Set in 1965, a kid, I don't know how old the kid is, but he's a kid, probably a teenager, wins a contest. He wins the Guess the Doozy Dots contest. The prize is $1,000. He decides to take his family on holiday. How many biographies of Barbara Pym have you read? I've read 3. And every single one of them mentions that one of her favorite writers in contemporary was the British writer, and it's a woman, Stevie Smith. And her novel, Notes on Yellow Paper, is, I think, if I'm not mistaken, her only novel. She wrote poetry as well, or certainly her most well-known novel. And it was a novel that Barbara Pym herself very admired. And when I finally read the third biography last year, the one that came out last year, I thought, this is stupid. I need to buy this book and read it. So here it is. When was it published? 1936. So yeah, just that was... Barbara Pym was already writing a lot of fiction by 1936, but none of it was published until 1950. Stevie Smith, born 1902, died 1971, and apparently her publishers weren't interested in her poetry and said, go away, write a novel, come back. So that's the genesis of this. And she did publish 2 other novels, including her last novel from 1949, The Holiday, which was her personal favorite. So, novel on yellow paper. The protagonist's name is Pompey. She is a secretary with a vivid imagination. Flights of said imagination, taking her to Euripides, Nazi Germany, and the Roman Catholic Church. Well, in the 1930s, some of that certainly was topical. I only read opening paragraphs or sentences if they have some kind of a standalone quality, and this one doesn't, but I think that it does sound really good. There is something in the first chapter, apparently, that's on the back, so I'll read that. So this is a quote from, I think, the first chapter. First reader, I will give you a word of warning. This is a foot-off-the-ground novel that came by the left hand, And if you are a foot-on-the-ground person, this book will be for you a desert of weariness and exasperation. So put it down. Leave it alone. It was a mistake you made to get this book. Oh, I love that. Okay. Looking forward to getting to that one. I got, because it was cheap online, it's not a very beautiful book, but it's a reprint of the winner of the very first Booker Prize. I'm sure there's a few of you watching that could name that novel before I even showed it to you. P.H. Newby's Something to Answer For. Now reprinted in a really ugly edition by Faber. Well, yeah, Faber does some strange things. So, the 1969 winner for the debut Booker Prize. Set in 1956, and the protagonist is in Port Said. Is that in Palestine? I'm not sure, but he's been summoned by the widow of his deceased friend, Eli Corey. And that sounds like a Palestinian surname to me. So I'm going to read you the opening chapter. I haven't previewed it. We'll see how it goes. The old girl kept writing and complaining about the police. It was enough to start Town Row on a sequence of dreams. Night after night he floated in the sunset-flushed marine city. He could smell the salt and the jasmine. He dreamed that Mrs. Cary, Mr. Cary, and he were all sailing out of the harbor in a boat that slowly filled with water. He dreamed he was in a hot, dark room with a lot of men who argued and shouted. It must have been in the Greek Sailing Club, because when a door opened, there were oars and polished skiffs, and opposite, high over Simon Artz's on the other side of the canal, was Johnny Walker with his cane and top hat setting off for Suez. Or was it the Med? Okay, I really like the writing there. I hope that's the only dream in the novel, because I really can't stand dreams in my fiction. But anyway, I'm wondering out there who among you, other than Bob the Booker, because I know he recently read it, like I think in 2021, has read this. Oh, I think maybe Karen of Run Right Reads might have too. I think this is Claire Fuller's debut, and I know I got this one used from some kind of a Facebook thing. 2015, I believe it's her debut, and I had never read it. I've read the one about the woman who leaves angry letters to her husband or ex-husband in all his books. Whatever that was called. I'll put the GIF up here, which I really enjoyed. And I think she said maybe two more after that, but the one that came out in 2020 or 2021, it just won some major British literary prize. Was it the Goldsmiths? I'm terrible with prizes, but it's on my shelf. I'm going to read it probably before I get to this one. Our Endless Numbered Days. I believe this is her debut. It was published in 2015. And the protagonist, at least at the opening of the novel, is a 8-year-old girl in 1976 with a survivalist father. And then another timeline is 9 years later, 1985. And she had disappeared into the forest in the interim. So, that sounds heavy. So let's listen to the opening paragraph of this. There's a heading at Chapter 1. It's not the title, but it's a diary marker, place and date. Highgate, London, November 1985. This morning I found a black and white photograph of my father at the back of the bureau drawer. He didn't look like a liar. My mother, Uta, had removed the other pictures of him from the albums she kept on the bottom shelf of the bookcase, and shuffled around all the remaining family and baby snapshots to fill the gaps. The framed picture of their wedding, which used to sit on the mantelpiece, had gone too. All right, well, that sets a tone. I believe it was Ronan Hession who tweeted about this novel, but if it wasn't, it might have been one of those other bookish people whose recommendations I take very highly, like James Morrison of Caustic Cover Critic or Dorian Stuber. But anyway, somebody on Twitter raved about this. I think it was Ronan. Summer Light, and Then Comes the Night, by John Kalman Stefánsson, who is an Icelandic writer. And this is supposed to be amazing. Translated from the Icelandic by Philip Roughton. 2006. It was originally published, and the English translation was 2020. It's set in an Icelandic village of 400 people. It's one of those horrific blurbs that doesn't say anything, and I often argue with readers who think these kind of blurbs are wonderful, but I'll just give you the opening sentence. And I don't judge the book by the blurb, because it has nothing to do with the author. But listen to this. Sometimes a distance from the world's tumult opens our hearts and our dreams. And it's just more like that Hallmark card bullshit copy. Get it off my books. Anyway, so yeah, the only thing concrete to grab onto is it's set in a small village, and that sounds interesting, and I don't need to know any more than that, but I have had a quick look at how the novel opens, and I really like the writing, but in order to give you a chunk that would stand alone, I'm not going to take that time, but it's a lot better than the blurb on the back, let's put it that way. Next, I have, it's kind of a gift, kind of a book exchange with the wonderful Annabelle Karras of BookTube, and also of the wonderful bookish podcast Books on the Go. She didn't get along with one book that I was really interested in, and so I asked her if I could trade something for it, and she said sure, and I can't remember what I traded it for, but I did send her something, and she sent me 2 books. She was only supposed to send me 1, so the one that I wanted, that I had my eye on, is a Aboriginal novel from Australia. Nardi Simpson, Song of the Crocodile. And it didn't work for her. It's a chunky bugger from 2020, set in a community, I'm not sure, it sounds, a town, an Australian town, where race relations between Indigenous and settler families are fraught, and you could pick any town in pretty much any Western country where that would be the case. And it's really the story of one family, the Billy Mill family, an Indigenous, or at least mixed race family. I'm going to read the first few paragraphs, just because. The sign at the entrance of town is neither informative nor welcoming. To see it emerge, crystallized from the heat of the horizon, is to have traveled a measureless distance over infinite time. The journey always begins prettily. The glory of a new dawn shines light around bends of peaceful ranges, pink and orange dazzling as it rises, warming your back, sending you on your way. Curves of rock sway, then twist, and you dance on hips and belly, shoulders and neck of the sleeping mountain woman beneath. As you continue, a ridgeline crests, then opens. You tiptoe along it, tires tickling her spine, until a steep descent to cleared, encouraged green opens into paddock and field, the land at her base rocky and rich, both signs of fortune and luck. Knife-sharp ranges and distant hills beckon. You continue towards them until eventually they dissolve into hints of ripple and crease. Finally, you hit the flat and scrub. And flat and scrub it continues to be, bland and harsh and unforgiving. Wide, bare earth, spare space, forgotten land. Black dirt meets red earth and turns metal hard. Hot springs and dried lakes hide motionless, waiting for reason to wake and flow. But this you cannot see. The scrub hides her secrets well. You travel on and on further still, numbed by endless coolabahs and tufts of grass and itchy blue blanket sky. Only when boredom, exhaustion, and blindness take hold does life rise from the plains. A sign. Darnmoor, the gateway to happiness. The sign taunts a fool into feeling some sense of achievement, that you have reached a destination at the very least. Yet, as the sign states, Darnmoor is merely the measure, a mark, a point on the road where you begin to move closer to the place you really want to be. Darnmoor itself is nothing. Well, I really like that writing, so let's see how it goes. And the one that I wasn't expecting, that she just gave me because I had commented on her video where she was raving about this, and I guess she had a bunch of copies to give to her, her BookTube godmother, which I am, and I'm assuming other bookish besties. Anyway, this is the anthology, The Gifts of Reading. Essays on the joys of reading, giving, and receiving books. And it has a word that often makes me cringe, but I think I'm going to overlook that and not cringe at it being used here. It is curated by Jennie Orchard, and it was inspired by Robert McFarlane. And she talked in her video, which I will link to. The link to her video will be underneath this book thing in my show notes. She talked really in a way that just intrigued me about the conception for this book and how Robert McFarlane, the nature writer, inspired it, and there are essays here by luminaries such as William Boyd, Roddy Doyle, Andy Miller, I believe isn't he from the Backlisted podcast? Jan Morris, Dina Nairi, Chigozie Obioma, Michael Ondaatje, Max Porter, Madeleine Tien, the author of my favorite novel of all time, Sally Vickers, Alice Pung, and so on. It's the kind of thing that if I hadn't heard her talk so enthusiastically about it, I probably would have never tried it, but she really sold it to me. Now I have it. Looking forward to giving it a try. Here is the novel by a black woman writer from America, Toni Cade Bambara's most well-known novel, as far as I understand it, The Salt Eaters. This is set in the South, a community of black people searching for the healing properties of salt. And they witness some event that changes their lives forever. Toni Cade Bambara, sadly, left us too soon. She died in 1995, and she wasn't very old, I don't think. This was published in 1980. I'll read the opening paragraph. There's one line of a dialogue and then a full paragraph, and I'll read that. Are you sure, sweetheart, that you want to be well? Velma Henry turned stiffly on the stool, the gown ties tight across her back, the knots hard. So taut for so long she could not swivel. Neck, back, hip joints dry, stiff, face frozen. She could not glower, suck her teeth, roll her eyes, do any of the Velma things by way of answering Minnie Ransom, who sat before her humming lazily up and down the scales, making a big to-do of draping her silky shawl, handling it as though it were a cape she'd swirl any minute over Velma's head and wipe out Veronica, or as though it were a bath towel she was drying her back with in the privacy of her bathroom. Oh my God, I love that opening paragraph so much. I don't know what a Veronica is. In a wipeout Veronica, small V Veronica. Anybody know? But that's just a gorgeous opening paragraph. Velma, I love her already. Okay, I'm getting to this one sooner than I thought, I think. By the end of 2020, I had pre-ordered a bunch of 2021 releases because I think it was because I was during the pandemic. I wasn't not spending so much money because I was never going out of the house or whatever. So yeah, I was feeling kind of flush and I pre-ordered a whole bunch of new releases that came, in the mail when they got published during the year, and this is one of them. It's obviously a reissue. Motley Stones by Adalbert Stifter. And I think I bought it because of the author's name. I just love the name Adalbert Stifter, translated from the German by Isabel Fargo Cole. So Stifter died in 1868, aged about in his maybe mid to late 50s. He was born in what was part of the Austrian Empire, but is today part of the Czech Republic. Kafka called him my fat brother, Thomas Mann. One of the most peculiar, enigmatic, secretly audacious, and strangely gripping storytellers in world literature. But he's considered now an Austrian writer. This is its first full English translation. It is a series of 6 thematically linked novellas, including the classic that apparently everybody knows him for, Rock Crystal. The first novella in this book is called Granite, and I will read you the opening paragraph of that. Outside the house where I and my father were born, right next to the entrance, lies a great 8-cornered stone shaped like a much elongated block. Its sides are rough-hewn, but its top surface, so often sat upon, is as fine and smooth as though coated by the most artful of glazes. The stone is very old, and no one has heard tell of the time when it was laid there. Our house's most ancient greybeards sat on that stone, as did those who perished in tender youth, and now slumber in the churchyard alongside all the others. The hollows trodden in the sandstone slabs, serving as the stone's base, also show its age, as do the deep holes worn by falling drops where the slabs project under the gutter. Well, certainly sets an atmosphere. While I don't love Thomas Hardy as much as Adam does, I certainly do love Thomas Hardy. He is one of the best Victorian novelists, and here's one of his most well-known novels that I have never read, Tess of the D'Urbervilles. I like these. Oxford World's Classic. I don't know why it's Oxford World's Classics. Why not just Oxford World Classics? But anyway, it's an attractive cover. This will be the next Hardy I read. It says on the back, new edition. I'm not going to look up what's new about it, but apparently There's something new about it. And here is a William Trevor novel that anything he wrote I'm interested in, but this one got on my radar because of Bob the Booker. He read it, I think, in 2021 and raved about it, so I bought it. It's the story of Lucy Gault. I think it's one of his more well-known novels. Set in the summer of 1921. Lucy Gault is 8. Her family's being forced to abandon their home. In fact, they're no longer welcome in Ireland. Lucy devises a plan to force her parents into staying in Ireland. Okay. I'm going to read you the first 2 paragraphs. Maybe more if I can't stop. Captain Everard Gault wounded the boy in the right shoulder on the night of June the 21st, 1921. Aiming above the trespassers' heads in the darkness, he fired the single shot from an upstairs window and then watched the 3 figures scuttling off, the wounded one assisted by his companions. They had come to fire the house, their visit expected because they had been before. On that occasion, they had come later, in the early morning, just after 1. The sheepdogs had seen them off, but within a week the dogs lay poisoned in the yard, and Captain Gault knew that the intruders would be back. "We are stretched at the barracks, sir," Sergeant Talty had said, when he came out from Ennisila. "Oh, stretched shocking, Captain." Lahardane wasn't the only house under threat. Every week somewhere went up, no matter how the constabulary were spread. "Please God, there'll be an end to it," Sergeant Talty said, and went away. Martial law prevailed, since the country was in a state of unrest, one that amounted to war. No action was taken about the poisoning of the dogs. Okay, well, that is at a very tumultuous, tragic time in Ireland's history, and oh, that sounds fantastic. And finally, here's another middle grade novel. This one came onto my radar because of Gina Stanier, of Gina Stanier Books, and she and I did a bite-sized chat. As of the day that I'm filming this book haul video, that bite-sized book chat has not been published, but it will have long before this book haul video is, so I'll put a link in the show notes. And it is called A Place to Hang the Moon by Kate Albus. And it is a British story and a very British cover. I just love the cover. But the author is American. How fabulous that it's getting praised right, left, and center. But yeah, Kate Albus grew up in New York and lives now in rural Maryland. It's her debut novel. And it's about 3 children not so upset by their not-so-grandmotherly grandmother's passing, and then who's going to take care of them in the dark days of World War II London. I just have to say, I don't know what it is. I guess it's kind of spiriting me back to my childhood, but I could look at that cover for hours. It just reminds me of Enid Blyton books and the Chronicles of Narnia. It just takes me back. I'm going to read the first 3 paragraphs of the opening because I'm just on a roll here of chapter 1. Funeral receptions can be tough spots to find enjoyment, but 11-year-old Edmund Pierce was doing his best. He was intent on the iced buns. Some of them had gone squashy on one side or the other, some had lost their icing when a neighboring bun had been removed, and a few had been sadly neglected in the icing department from the start. Undaunted, Edmund picked through the pile, finding 2 that met with his approval. He shoved one into each of his trouser pockets, and scooping up a handful of custard cream cookies to round out the meal, navigated through the crowd until he found a vacant armchair. There he settled, quite content despite the occasion. It helped that he'd never cared much for his grandmother anyway. On the other side of the room, Anna Pierce sat cross-legged on the floor between a corner cabinet and a brocade settee. The settee's occupants didn't notice the 9-year-old tucked under the weighty scroll of its arm. Anna had nearly finished Mary Poppins, and she preferred its company to that of the unfamiliar elderly ladies perched on the settee, or any of the other guests. Like her brother, Anna had managed to find enjoyment at the funeral reception. Also like her brother, Anna felt little grief at her grandmother's passing. Well, that sounds wonderful, and oh my God, now my nostalgia's triggered all this shit. Mary Poppins? I mean, I loved the movie, I guess, but the novels, I read them all from the age of 8 or 9. I read all of them. They're just wonderful. I want to reread them. In fact, I bought a facsimile reprint of the of the original Mary Poppins book. It's on the shelf. I hope I still have it because now that oh my goodness. Can't wait to get to this one too. All right, that's my book haul. Thanks for watching.